played against a team with the best strikers I've seen. The three together is absolutely exceptional, and from nothing they can create a chance. They have 2 or 3 players who transform normal life into art, and I respect that.
What happens when you take 3 of the best attackers in a generation and put them into one team? Greatness? Maybe. Because sometimes what you get is disappointment. Why did Messi, Neymar, and Suarez become perhaps the greatest trio our beautiful game has ever seen, but changing out one legend for a future legend led to chaos? It's easy to forget that the MSN era did not begin nearly as rosily as we remember it. Messi was the focal point at false 9 and took delight in torturing opposition from here. The thought of moving Messi from the central position to accommodate any other player in the world seemed like lunacy, and it meant that in the first few matches, Suarez played at right wing, where he looked awkward and out of place. But then, something changed. Messi, in a show of humility and putting the team's needs ahead of his, reverted to the right wing position of his early years to allow Suarez to provide a dedicated focal point for the attack. And that changed the game. Messi embraced his wider position and could stay in this zone to take on his fullback, of course getting past them more often than not to wreak havoc in the wider zones. When Messi was wide, Neymar would let his tendency to drift in take root, and he could momentarily be the creator-in-chief. But one of Suarez's biggest strengths throughout his career was his movement and his selflessness in it. At the best possible moment, he would make a dart into a wider zone, dragging defenders with him and creating space for Messi to cut in field and do whatever he felt like with the ball. All the while down the left, a young Neymar was perfectly happy coming infield when the situation demanded. But he was more likely to hold his width than Messi was. Neymar, as one of the finest dribblers the game has seen, would get past his men time and time again out wide. The secret sauce of this trio was summed up in a single word: fluidity. Messi was much likelier to drop deep to the tip of the diamond, while the sprightlier Neymar could run in behind where needed to give them more depth to open up the opposition, and Suarez could do the same at times. But when the 2 on-the-ball players were coexisting in the middle of the pitch, they had a prime Suarez to aim for, whose elusive movement and ability to finish from anywhere on the pitch made him impossible to defend. Why then did this not translate to PSG? 2 of the players were the same on paper, but they were not the same players. Both were still amongst the finest in the world, with Messi coming off a Ballon d'Or winning campaign, but it was undeniable that both had aged and were not quite at their unfathomable primes anymore. Where Neymar used to be a mix of an attacker who loved to get on the ball, but could also run in behind if he had sufficient support with him, now he wanted to be on the ball just as much as Messi, and this led to the pair treading on each other's toes at times when they found themselves occupying similar spaces. But the biggest problem was Mbappe, or at least the type of player he was. Unlike Suarez, Mbappe was not happy playing as a solo centre forward, and was outspoken about how he liked playing a freer, wider role, or as part of a front 2 with his target man alongside him. Although he never got anywhere near as many touches as his teammates, he was not content at being on the fringes of the game, and only occasionally touching the ball like some sort of target man. He too wanted to drift deep, and wide left when suited him, leading to him invading Neymar's zone, just like how Neymar invaded Messi's. But when the trio were at their best, it presented as remarkable fluidity. They would rotate effortlessly, replacing each other and combining at the speed of light. But at their worst, they were a tangled mess, who were all trying to achieve the same thing. MSN was 3 players, each happy in their primary role, but with enough freedom to express themselves. But PSG was 3 players with ultimate freedom, but none of whom were happy to take up the traditional centre-forward role. But football, of course, is never played in a vacuum, and the team surrounding them played just as big a role. At Barcelona, the front 3 only ever looked at one man in the dugout during the tenure, Luis Enrique. On top of that, they had a first 11 that was almost set in stone, meaning they not only knew their own roles perfectly, they intimately knew those behind them and the movements that they would make. Paris brought with it some instability. In their 2 seasons, they were under the wings of 2 managers. Firstly, Mauricio Pochettino, who struggled to settle on a single formation, fluctuating primarily between a 4-3-3 with Messi wide and a 4-2-3-1 that saw Messi dedicated to the whole. The second season saw Christophe Galtier come into the side and switch to a back 3 with flying wingbacks. Barcelona was a possession side and had a clear identity, where their primary role was to keep possession and move up the pitch in a controlled manner. But Luis Enrique did bring an increased directness to the team, which only served to make them better because the rest of of the side effectively sat back and did most of the defending, allowing the front three to loiter higher up the pitch, ready to strike at the neck of their opponent. This was also facilitated by the makeup of the midfield, as they had perhaps the greatest pivot in history, certainly in possession, and he would be able to pick up the ball off the centre-backs and begin the moves higher up the pitch. That was paired with another all-timer in Andres Iniesta, who could receive and carry the ball up the pitch, or just keep his station higher up, ready to provide the final creative flourish. All of this designed to allow the attackers to focus on attacking. Now, Iniesta was aging, and while Busquets was still incredible, they missed the insane deep progression that Xavi used to provide. So Messi would have to drop deeper to help with the progression at times. But it was nowhere near the levels he was required to do so at PSG, where he found himself dropping deeper and deeper, especially in the 4-2-3-1 when PSG were extremely light in midfield. If the opposition successfully cut out Verratti, the only progressive option, it was up to Messi to move extremely deep to assist, which would reduce his connectivity to his fellow forwards. Even in the 4-3-3 orientation, they faced a similar issue, as the third midfielder was Wijnaldum, who himself is an off-the-ball midfielder, looking to attack the box rather than progress the ball. The fullbacks also helped the cause at Barcelona, with Jordi Alba and Dani Alves for the first couple of MSN seasons pushing aggressively forward, meaning that both men were free to come in central to have immense combination opportunities. And PSG did try to mimic this, with the aggressive duo of Nuno Mendes and Hakimi providing the width. And while of course the three did have their own unique spark, the positional overlap due to not having a dedicated forward did begin to show some strain. Their vulnerability to counterattacks was also interesting to note, with just two men in the midfield and occasionally a third attacking midfielder. When the fullbacks pushed forward, they left the midfield and defense exposed, and the opposition feasted on this, with teams having more success on the break, particularly during the final season of this front three. This, in fact, is part of the reason Galtier opted for the back three, giving them more solidity, although it was to limited success. But MSN also faced similar weaknesses at Barcelona, especially when both fullbacks pushed higher up. However, at times, the more considered attacking play allowed Barcelona to move up as a unit, allowing them to have more protection and opportunities to counter-press before they could be counter-attacked. But the defense is one of the biggest differences between these two trios. While MSN can hardly be described as pressing monsters, Suarez's work rate often meant that they were able to harry the opposition higher up, with a sprightlier Neymar at least doing somewhat of a job defensively. But the midfield was also designed to try and mitigate the biggest defensive weaknesses, as Rakitic, though an excellent technician, was consistently covering the space behind Messi to offer some balance as the most mobile man. Even in set defenses, the Barcelona midfield would offset themselves to be able to provide cover across the pitch as much as they could. PSG had similar concerns and problems. Both Neymar and Messi were much older, and while Neymar's defensive work rate wasn't quite as low as Messi's, it still meant that Les Parisiens still had issues, particularly under Poch, where he was more insistent that his men looked to defend from the front, often in the wide regions. Their ineffective pressing would mean that the opposition would get past them easily, and the midfield would be underloaded, especially when Messi was playing as the most attacking midfielder. The back three did give them more pitch coverage, and the high attacking wingbacks meant that at best, PSG had a two-man shield before their backline was being directly attacked. And where in MSN, Neymar contributed more defensively and Suarez led the defensive contributions, at PSG none of the front three even gave the impression of defending for a second longer than needed. This meant that this side effectively defended with a block of 4 to 5, and perhaps up to 7 if their wingbacks held their position, but it still made it a lot easier for the opposition to progress through these deeper regions. But to pretend that the three were at each other's throats or a complete failure would border on slander. It's almost impossible to assemble three players this talented and not have them as one of the finest trios the game has to offer, despite PSG's best efforts. In their 2 Liga seasons alone, the trio directly assisted each other 52 times, with Messi to Mbappe being the most fruitful combination, and it all meant that the trio directly combined every 125 minutes, a brilliant ratio. The only problem is that it pales in comparison to the direct combination every 72 minutes that MSN had in their pomp in La Liga. But these stats ignore one key issue, because a massive factor in this conversation is not just the differences in how they played on the pitch, it's also how often they played on the pitch. Considering La Liga alone, the trio played close to 80 games together, meaning they were available for roughly 65% of the games, with the biggest injury issues being Neymar missing 11 games through injury in 15-16 and Messi 18 that same season. But PSG's trio was never plagued with injury. Messi missed 15 total games in 21-22 and 8 further ones the next season. But Neymar was even more injury prone, missing 38 games in all competitions, the equivalent to a full league season, meaning they only ever played together for 36% of the Liga minutes available, a key factor in this tale.
Para mí la grandeza de este tridente no es cine del futbolístico, es la capacidad que tuvieron como personas para llevarse bien dentro del vestuario y poner por delante el interés del equipo al individual y al personal.
The off-the-pitch chemistry of MSN was something to behold, as three superstars completely put their egos aside to form an incredible bond. PSG brought a different dynamic. Neymar had arrived in the French capital to escape the shadow of Messi and let the world see the results of a team being built completely around him. He had Ballon d'Or ambitions on his mind, and it was never a secret. Mbappe was the young superstar, whose rapid progress PSG may not have accounted for as Neymar arrived. Mbappe was the local boy with global influence and the potential to transform PSG into an undoubted superpower on and off the pitch, just like they craved. His influence grew and extended with each passing year, even culminating in at least having somewhat of a say about what players came into the club. Slowly, an undoubted face of the club emerged, which was not Neymar as he had been promised, nor was it Messi, who had been accustomed to being the main man since his early 20s. It may have been a small part of why M&M did not work as well as they hoped, and aren't remembered as fondly, but it was a part nonetheless. In the end, it was the footballing world's loss, as seeing three elite players in their pomp would have been a dream. But for now we can smile that we at least got to witness MSN.
And if you've enjoyed this video, with the season over, if you've always wanted to learn tactical analysis yourself, and perhaps make content yourself, now is the perfect opportunity. Tactical Mastery is my program designed to be your step-by-step guide to mastering tactical analysis, and compresses a decade of tactical learning into a highly detailed but highly digestible resource. But on top of teaching you everything about tactical analysis, Tactical Mastery is designed to help you do something else, build a portfolio of analysis online. And that's because building a portfolio is one of the most powerful things you can do, helping you find like-minded people, build an audience, or even get noticed by clubs, whether it's writing a blog, building a YouTube channel, or anything else. To help you do this within Tactical Mastery, I walk you through my complete process on the resources I use to make videos, as well as how to write effective, educational, and engaging tactical scripts. And if that wasn't enough, you'll also get exclusive discounts to analysis software to help you with your journey. If that sounds good, check out Tactical Mastery through the top link in the description and get your discount today.